You are listening to The Hero's Journey. I'm Jeff Garvin.
And I'm Dan Zarzana.
Let the journey begin.
I can't analyze this movie. It's too smart. Maybe if I were smart like Charlie Kaufman, I'd be happier. My mom says I'm fat. Fat like Chris Christie. I need to turn my life around. What do I need to do? I need to start writing again. 1,000 words a day. Really do it this time. I could learn Japanese. I could be that podcast host who speaks Japanese and plays the hurdy-gurdy. That would be cool. I should get my hair colored. Then I would look younger. If I looked younger, I'd be happier. I'd still be...
Dan?
Huh?
You're doing it again.
Oh. You heard all that?
Everybody heard all that.
Why didn't I cut it? I edit the show. I could have cut it so nobody would have heard my inner anxieties. Then I'd be happier.
You can still cut it.
Oh, but if you're hearing this, the episode's already out. This is the episode.
Wait, this is an episode about us recording an episode?
I've written us into our own episode.
That's weird, right? Ooh, Donald was a fun character. Does that mean, am I Donald?
No, you are Jeff. Jeff.
Whoa. This is exactly what Charlie Kaufman did when he wrote Adaptation. It's self-indulgent, it's narcissistic, it's solipsistic, it's pathetic. But it's also brilliant. So brilliant. Why can't I be brilliant like Charlie Kaufman? Then I'd be happier.
If Donald is just another part of Charlie's own mind, what does that make you? Are you just the other half of me? The smart half?
Maybe we need to pitch ourselves through a windshield and see which one of us survives. Then we'd be happier.
Yeah. Act 1 of The Hero's Journey begins with the world of common day. We see our character in their status quo, normal life. Charlie Kaufman, played wonderfully by Nicolas Cage.
Oh, man.
In a dual role in this film.
I love him so much.
An unhappy, neurotic screenwriter of the brilliant film Being John Malkovich.
Yes.
Which at the time of the setting of Adaptation is still being filmed, so Kaufman is an unknown name in Hollywood. So
yeah.
he's even shooed off the set. The first AD
his own movie.
Oh, he gets shooed off the set. You're in the eye line. Get off the set. Oh, poor
By
Charlie
the way,
Kaufman.
like that whole scene where he's on the set of Being John Malkovich and you're seeing like a documentary being made about the movie being made is its own meta thing. And then
yes.
And then they got Nick Cage on a set and filmed in the same. I wonder how they did all that. It was so beautifully done.
They didn't shoot that for Adaptation?
Oh, I think they shot the Nick Cage part, but I think that Being John Malkovich stuff, I don't know, maybe that was all original.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess they could have gotten John Malkovich to do it if, Malkovich loved Kaufman or something. I just thought that was, like, some of it was found footage and some of it was matched. That was my guess.
I wonder.
If so, Malkovich did a great job of playing who we think John Malkovich is probably like on set.
Shut up. Okay? Let's really try today to solve our camera problems. Keep between take time at an absolute minimum. These masks are really hot, okay? I want to be very well heard on that from everybody. Don't futz unless it's absolutely important to the shot, okay? I don't say that for me. I say that for the people sitting here in 400 pounds of rubber. I like my dress. Okay? Very good.
Another part of Charlie's world of common day is that he lives with his twin brother, Donald. Also played by Nicolas Cage. And Donald is, I guess as he's introduced, he's somewhat of a layabout.
Right.
But Donald wants to be a screenwriter, just like his brother.
What a nightmare.
Here's where I had so much trouble with this analysis, where as I was sitting down to do this analysis, I started feeling those inadequacies that Charlie has as he's writing the film. The movie is supposed to be about Susan Orlean, the author of The Orchid Thief, and her experience writing her book. So, sure, we've also got Susan Orlean, played by multi-time Academy Award winner Meryl Streep.
Yes.
I guess her world of common day is a writer for The New Yorker at the time this starts. But, man, there was just so much Charlie to digest that I couldn't even really focus on Susan.
Yeah, there's Charlie's hero's journey, there's Susan's hero's journey, And then there's the hero's journey within the book that Susan is writing. So it's just like an inception of meta narratives.
And that's what is so brilliant about this screenplay.
Yes. He solves the problem by exploiting the problem with Susan Orlean's book. He turns it inside out. I had the same problem, Dan. I wanted to do a hero's journey for Susan, but I had so much difficulty just parsing Charlie's hero's journey that I kind of just put in a couple notes here and there about Susan, because her narrative unfolds out of order with multiple flashbacks inside of flashbacks. So, as much as they joke about Charlie not being good at structure, he's a genius at structure, right? He's a genius at structure. That brings us to Call to Adventure. The hero is presented with a challenge, which renders them unable to continue living in the comfort of the ordinary world. Charlie takes a meeting with film executive Valerie Thomas, played brilliantly by Tilda Swinton. She has this passionate fake interest / exploitative kindness that is so subtle and so prevalent in the Hollywood industry. Don't say industry, but it's like she appears to care, but she says the same thing to everyone she meets, so you're not sure if it's sincere or if she's just really good at this pitch. Anyway, he's sweating profusely, and as his voiceover continues, telling us how nervous he is.
I've got to stop sweating. Can she see it dripping down my forehead? Oh, she looked at my hairline. She thinks I'm bald.
She wants to hire Charlie to adapt a nonfiction book by New Yorker writer and journalist Susan Orlean called The Orchid Thief. So that I see as Charlie's call to adventure. I think it's probably important to insert some info about Susan, because otherwise we're not really going to understand other parts of the journey later on, right?
Yeah, sure.
So we cut back and forth in Susan's timeline from present day to 3 years ago when she was writing The Orchid Thief. And then I think there's even more flashbacks to when she had just written the article and wasn't yet. It's very confusing to me. But I think the best representation of her call is a meeting with Valerie Thomas, who wants to option her New York article for a movie.
Oh, wow.
That's the beginning of the path that sets Charlie and Susan Orlean on a collision course. So I saw that as her call to adventure. But then I also had this other scene that I thought was a call to adventure. But then later I thought it was a crossing of the threshold. There's this scene, right? I'm so inadequate that there's this scene where she's with John LaRoche, who's the orchid thief, the crazy, toothless, super smart guy who goes into the swamps, the Fakahatchee Nature Preserve. Yeah, and steals orchids.
Well, he doesn't. His Seminole accomplices do, because they can.
That's right. He's leveraged the law, the Native American exceptions. Anyway, he tells her all about orchids and how they each have a specifically adapted insect that pollinates them like soulmates. And he says, when you spot your flower, you can't let anything get in your way. And so, in a way, that's her call to adventure, to find her flower. It's the thing that sets her on her path to want to pursue the ghost orchid and also pursue her deeper life outside of her miserable marriage with her husband. So I saw that as a call to adventure as well.
Holy smoke, man. That was, I saw that as almost approaching the inmost cave for her.
I give up. Wow.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. Our demigod patrons, Joseph Wilt.
Oh man!
You want to do the rest of the episode? All right. Let's try. Let's see what we can do. All right. Call to adventure for Susan, I thought, was just the writing of the article, because when she has the meeting with Valerie Thomas about optioning the book for a film, she's already written the article, and all of the scenes that we see with her and LaRoche, their introduction, that's for the article, not for the book.
I agree with you. I wasn't looking at Susan's hero's journey from her own chronological perspective. I was looking as how her narrative interfaced with the timeline of the film. And so
yeah,
at one point I had, she's reading about orchids, and that's what inspires her to go investigate John LaRoche. Like somehow there's a scene where she's in her office at night and she's flipping through an orchid book, And I was like, well, is that before she knows about John LaRoche, or is it like you never see her get the Orchid Book idea? But so the scene with Valerie Thomas, I identified it as if she's the counterpart to Charlie Kaufman, then the whole thing with LaRoche is just backstory, and she hasn't been interfaced. That's all part of her World of Common Day, and her present day story is trying to escape from the investigative powers of Charlie Kaufman, who's going to expose the truth about her. And so I saw that that meeting of adapting her book as the beginning of the unweaving of her life, because that's when Charlie Kaufman gets inserted. So that was my very twisted rationalization.
What cooks my noodle is that we don't know how much of Susan's story is authentic in terms of the film's world, and how much of it is completely fabricated by Charlie Kaufman trying to write the film.
Right.
He goes into, when he's having that meeting with Valerie Thomas, that's probably a different segment of the adventure. So let's move on from call to adventure to refusal of the call. This is where the hero, confronted with fear of the unknown, refuses the call to adventure. Sometimes this energy is expressed from within the hero. Sometimes the refusal comes from outside forces. There's a scene where Charlie sits down to write. He's sitting in front of his typewriter. He's doing a voiceover narration. I need to write, I need to establish the themes, but I really want coffee. Maybe I should write something first and then reward myself with coffee. It's like he's not writing. He needs to write, but he's doing everything except. It's like Jack in The Shining when he's throwing a tennis ball against the wall instead of actually writing his book.
That scene is so relatable.
Yes.
The terror of the blank page and the mundanity and the banality of all this stupid stuff that goes through your head, and the bargaining about I'll write something first. He captured it so perfectly. And, as a writer, I can't tell if it would be as entertaining to a non-writer as it is to me, but that's exactly the experience. And I love that he's got, he owns a house, he's a professional screenwriter, and yet his writing table is a chair at knee level, and he's hunched over this crappy typewriter instead of having a desk.
Like a little chair that almost looks like it's from a kid's table or something.
And Donald has a real desk. He's working at an actual desk.
Yeah.
And Charlie's bent over this, his whole world is designed for maximal suffering. Anyway.
There was another moment that I saw as refusal of the call. And this is when we are introduced to Donald. Charlie has returned home. He's distraught, lying on his bed. Donald says he's going to be a screenwriter. He uses the word industry, talking about Hollywood. And Charlie says to his brother, don't say industry. I saw that moment as Charlie rejecting the concept of Hollywood being an industry rather than a community of artists. He holds himself as an artist.
Yeah.
Not a part of a business.
Right.
And so to use the word industry offends him. And he's pushing that away when what he really needs to do is embrace it because he's writing a Hollywood film.
Yeah. I love Donald so much in this movie.
Me too.
He is pure love and acceptance, and he just looks up to his brother and thinks of him as this brilliant artist and just wants to impress him, and wants to be loved. And even when he finds out Charlie's making fun of him, he sort of accepts it because it's funny. And he's just, man, to have somebody in your corner like that, and yet because Charlie sees him as a lesser creative, every positive thing he says lands on him like an insult. It's so, and anyway, I really relate to Charlie's sort of, his self-loathing is so profound that not even the pure love of his twin can penetrate its gloom. I had a completely different refusal of the call, and what you just said is in a different section for me. And usually you can know on this podcast that I push back hard and I'll dig my feet in, but I am awash in misery and confusion. It's as though Charlie Kaufman was able to reach out from inside his movie and cast the spell of insecurity and self-doubt on me, the analyst.
Maybe if you'd picked a different refusal of the call, you'd be happier.
So in the meeting with Valerie Thomas, she says, we're excited. We want to hear what you have to say about it. He lays out all the things he doesn't want the movie to be. Like you said, he's pushing back on the industry by saying industry. He calls out every trope. I don't want him to fall in love. I don't want there to be, sex or drugs or a caper or and then he goes further, he's like, or people learning profound lessons and growing or changing. Like he starts with all the cheesy Hollywood tropes and then goes down to literally every function of every story told. I mean, he might as well dismantle the hero's journey while he's at it. And Valerie Thomas is like nodding, and then like I don't know what that means. So I saw that as his refusal to accept the Hollywood job. Like I'm not going to write the thing you want me to write, but he takes the job anyway. And I think this happens in Hollywood where they've decided you're the right guy because you have some mysterious thing and they want you to write the thing and they don't really care what you have to say. It's like a pitchable thing. Hey, remember that Malkovich guy? He's writing the Susan Orlean book. We're going to put the chocolate in the peanut butter. I saw that as the refusal. And then I did find a refusal for Susan, although I think it's from Without. But she's at this party with a bunch of people from the New Yorker. They're like belittling LaRoche and calling him, oh, what a fascinating character. And they're having a laugh at LaRoche's expense. And they're treating Susan like she's so clever for exploiting this, little man and his quirky story. And she's kind of laughing along. And then she retreats to the bathroom. And man, Meryl Streep, she has this little moment with no dialogue where she's looking in the mirror, and then there's a little bit of voiceover where she says, I want to know what it's like to care about something passionately. To me, that scene is like a combination of refusal crossing the threshold, because she's coming to terms with the refusal from Without, people pressing against her, just be an uppity elite New York journalist. And she's saying, no, I want to care about something.
I did see one moment of self-doubt refusal from Charlie, and then we can move on. Charlie is on a date with Amelia, and Charlie tells Amelia that he can't believe he got the writing job for The Orchid Thief because he was sweating and ranting and making an idiot of himself. That's that moment. We talk a lot about moments of self-doubt that are a representation of the refusal. I think that's it for this.
I can't be a writer. I'm just Charlie.
Right.
Oh, geez. Well, I guess just out of mercy, we should move to meeting with the mentor. The hero receives counsel on how to operate in this special world. I saw the best mentor in this movie is Donald. And Charlie has this scene at the beginning with Donald where Donald says he's going to become a screenwriter and take the Robert McKee seminar. And he tells Charlie about the principles of screenwriting. So he's giving Charlie essentially pretty good advice about how to write a screenplay. And Charlie tells him that none of that works and that writing is a journey into the unknown. And Donald tries to humble him. He says, McKee is a Fulbright scholar. Are you a Fulbright scholar? It's like Donald is trying to, in some way, get Charlie to get out of his sort of self-important artist bubble and just write the story. I love Donald. And then there's another moment at that party you were just mentioning after Charlie tells Amelia he can't believe he got the job. Amelia says, we're going to fix this whole Charlie Kaufman mess. And, she talks about his clothes and he shouldn't wear that. He should be more confident. And she says she's glad he took the Orchid script. She's giving him encouragement and trying to sort of build his outside to be more like the man he needs to be on the inside to write this script.
But in an excellent line of meta dialogue, she says, it'll be good for you to get out of your own head for a change. This whole film is Charlie dealing with what's in his head.
Yes.
That's a great line of dialogue.
I had a mentor moment for Susan. They're in the van together, and LaRoche is telling her, she's asking questions about how did you become so fascinated by orchids? And he sort of tells her about all these other things he's been fascinated about that he's then just completely cut off in a moment. And she's trying to figure out how to be passionate, and he's telling her that passion can die in a moment. And she is just mystified. Like, I'm even more confused how I'm supposed to find passion. So I saw that as a weird sort of mentor moment where the mentor doesn't actually get the message across very well.
Did you have the opportunity to read The Orchid Thief?
I considered it and didn't even try. Did you read it?
No, I had the same experience. It was something like it would give me good insight into Susan, because there's a lot of questions I have about how much of Susan's story as it's presented in the film is authentic, is from the actual Orchid Thief book, and how much of it did Kaufman create.
Listen to the tidbits, because I've got some good trivia, and there's a good YouTube link I'll send you guys to for an interview with Susan Orlean about that.
The tidbits are the exclusive audio content available for
$3 a month, you can gain access to the bonus audio content. And of course, at every tier above that.
Crossing the First Threshold, where the hero must pass a barrier to enter the special world. This crossing represents the hero's commitment to taking on the adventure. I saw a moment where Charlie is in his room on his hands and knees, his dry and cracked finger tracing a map of Florida. Then we hear him in his head narrating.
We open on State Road 29. A battered white van speeds along, making a sharp skidding right into the Fakahatchee Strand State Preserve. The driver of the van is a skinny man with no front teeth. This is John LaRoche. I need a break.
Finally, he's beginning to write the screenplay. That was his crossing.
The scene where he sits down to face the blank page, to me, is a threshold crossing. Putting the first typed words on the page is another threshold crossing. But for me, when you sit down and stare at the blank page for the first time, that is facing the abyss. So I saw that as crossing the threshold.
So maybe putting actual ink to paper is successfully passing the first test.
I love the juxtaposition of Charlie sitting at his, it's not even a desk, it's like an old 70s wicker back chair that he's got his crappy typewriter on. Cut to Susan Orlean in her perfect writer's office with bookshelves and the perfect amount of clutter and her glasses. And she's sitting at a MacBook, typing fluently from clearly brilliant notes that she's taking, and the prose is flowing out of her. It's clearly like Charlie Kaufman's fantasy of what writing is supposed to be like.
So that wraps up Act 1. My goodness.
Does it? Are we sure it is?
Well, let's write ourselves out of this Act 1 at very least. What did you get up to this month to reward yourself for doing your analysis?
Well, I have a friend named Carrie Kletter who was a debut author with me in 2016, and her second novel is not a YA novel. It's an adult novel called East Coast Girls. I read this because she's my friend. I did not expect to like it, not because I don't like her, but because it's about 4 women who go to the beach 12 years after a tragedy happens at the end of their high school experience to reconnect. And I didn't think I would be able to relate to this book at all. I had all sorts of judgy male BS, and she blew me away. I should have had more confidence in her. It is a gripping, emotional, moving book about these 4 women who basically have to revisit and reconstruct the thing that happened in their life that sort of stunted them all and sent them off in the wrong direction. It's from 4 different perspectives, which generally is really hard for me. I generally have trouble tracking multiple POVs, but she made these 4 characters so distinct and so original that I was blown away. Most of the book takes place on the East Coast, Washington, D.C., New York, and Montauk. And I just got such a sense of this place I'd never been. You know, it's like vacationing on the Hamptons in a beautiful old house. And she just puts you there. And the prose is gorgeous. It's literature. East Coast Girls by Carrie Kletter. Can't recommend it highly enough. Absolutely loved it. And then I finally watched Guardians of the Galaxy, which I loved. I haven't gotten into the Marvel movies as much as all my friends, and I finally watched it for Saturday night movie night, and we decided as a family that we're going to do the whole Marvel comic universe in release order. Starting after we watch Guardians of the Galaxy 2, we're going to start back at Iron Man and watch the whole thing.
Wow, that is an undertaking.
It is, but the kids are into it, and we just decided, why not? We've got access to them all. I'm going to really give them a shot. I've been super skeptical ever since I saw and disliked Thor, but maybe it's time for me to step away from my loathing and enjoy some comic book movies. So there you go. That was my month in entertainment. How about you?
Last episode, you talked about having watched the first few episodes of Cobra Kai.
Yes.
And that got me finally to sit down and watch it.
Yeah.
I binged season 1 in one sitting.
Whoa!
And then I watched season 2 over 3 sittings after that. So, like, within a matter of days, I have consumed the entirety of Cobra Kai.
What did you think?
And I absolutely love it.
Oh, good.
This is how an IP should be revisited.
Yes.
I absolutely loved it. They handled it so perfectly. And the fact that the showrunners are big Karate Kid fans is so apparent on screen. There are the little references and there's musical cues that are references to the original film. And it's so good. And just I love watching this now basically from Johnny's perspective. He's kind of, like you said, he's kind of the hero now. You root for Johnny, and you see him deal with all the crap from the film and how it really screwed up his life and how he's going to do it better.
Yeah.
He's going to fix what John Kreese broke, and his kids are going to be good kids. And to watch all that play out over 2 seasons, I know they've been renewed for a 4th. I'll be interested to see how season 3 winds up. It's not out yet. I think it's going to be out in January.
I think one of the things that's so powerful about that show, at times it's very tongue-in-cheek, but at other times it's very serious. And I love how we're a super polarized society right now, and Johnny and Daniel are about as far apart class-wise as you can get. But they have this similar past, and so much of what they care about overlaps, and yet they are diametrically opposed foes. And you get to see what it's like for these two people to have animosity for each other, even though they're so similar. And I think that's a commentary on what's happening in our country right now.
Gee, man, I was just going to talk about a cool karate show, and you got all existential about it.
Now, maybe if I just enjoyed the karate, I'd be happier.
I also read a bunch of books. I can't go through all of them, but one that I want to mention is The Wayfinders by Wade Davis. And it was really good. It's a cultural anthropology book. It is the result of a series of lectures that Wade Davis gave across Canada in 2009, the Massey Lectures. If we have any Canadian listeners, they might be familiar with that. It's a I guess every year an intellectual is invited to give a series of lectures across the country. And they are broadcast live on CBC Radio. The lectures are then also compiled into a physical book that attendees of these lectures receive. The book itself was really interesting. He goes back to the Polynesian culture and how they can, in a little canoe, talented Polynesian navigators can read the ocean like you and I could go outside and read the streets and the hills and be able to find our way around. A Polynesian navigator can sit in their canoe and feel the ocean and be aware of like 5 different swells and currents and patterns and find their way without a map, without any tools, no compass or anything, and find their way from one island to another hundreds of miles away.
Wow.
Today, there are 7,000 different languages spoken in the world, and that blew me away. I had no idea that there are that many languages. But every 2 weeks, one of those languages dies because the last person who knows that language passes away.
Wow.
Because people are either willingly or being forced to leave their ancestral lands for the cities. They are entering modern 21st century society and not going back because they're being kind of swept up by our current society. So there's these cultures that are dying every year, and he says that by the end of a generation there's going to be half as many languages spoken.
Wow.
We're seeing this extinction of cultures at a rate faster than we're seeing the extinction of plant and animal life.
Wow. That's crazy.
It's kind of sad.
You know, all that stuff you said about Polynesian navigators, that is what Moana is all about. And I know I've brought this movie up. I would love to do Moana. Having just read this book, you should watch it because there are whole sequences that are about what you just mentioned.
Well, maybe that'll be my side quest for next episode.
Oh.
So shall we continue on to Act 2?
Let's do it. Act 2 of the hero's journey begins with tests, allies, and enemies, more aptly titled The Road of Trials for this episode.
Oh boy, yeah.
This is where the hero is now in the special world, and they make allies and meet enemies, and they have to pass a series of tests to prove their worthiness. Okay, so allies would be Amelia, Donald, although he's got some shapeshifter qualities if you're looking through the eyes of Charlie. Marty, his agent, I'd say is pretty much evenly in the ally side. And Valerie Thomas, oddly, I think, is in the ally side. On the enemies front, I think Charlie himself is his biggest enemy.
That's exactly what I wrote.
Yeah, I think Susan Orlean is a shapeshifter. At one point, she is his imaginary mentor, and at another point, she's like an aspirational ally, and then in the third act, she becomes an enemy. Also, Robert McKee is a shapeshifter. He is the absolute devil to Charlie, but then ends up being a key mentor. So everyone is flipping and switching and changing gears in this movie. I have Charlie beginning to type the script as a test. I have romantic tests. They have the almost kiss at the party, but Charlie can't close the deal. And then he shanks another romantic test in the car after the symphony. Like, they pull up to the house after going to the symphony together, and she literally says, "What are you up to now then?" Which is as clear as an invitation gets, dude. But he shanks it and fails to kiss her, and then he second guesses himself and says, and then he asks her to join him in Santa Barbara for an orchid conference, but she's out. He's had so many opportunities that the idea of going on another platonic date with him for a whole weekend just doesn't interest her, and she's out. And then he has, the editing here is so great. He's like, actually, I should get out of the car right now and I go up to the door and kiss her. I'm going to do that now. And then he drives away. It's so great. And then there's another sort of romantic / reality versus fantasy failure with the amazing Judy Greer as Alice the waitress. You know, he's trying to hit on the waitress. The waitress is nice to him, and he mistakes that for her liking him, and he asks her out. But he has this fantasy of them going to the orchid show together, and like she seduces him in the garden behind the thing. And cut to
amazing.
Cut to Charlie procrastinating, and then Donald interrupts him with his enthusiastic pitch.
Don't say pitch.
Now here, Charlie has an opportunity to flex his screenwriter muscles, but he can't even, like, he tries to shoot down Donald's ridiculous, cliche-riddled pitch, but he can't even muster an articulate critique, and he just gives up. Like, he's so unsure of himself, he can't even adequately tear down Donald's horrible script idea. It's so great. Another test of confidence on the set of Malkovich. He tries to get the attention of Cusack and Keener and fails. But meanwhile, Donald's making waves with Maggie Gyllenhaal.
I have to help you with it. It is actually Gyllenhaal. Yeelan, hello.
There it is.
Yeelan, hello.
There it is. Anyway, there's another awkward romantic encounter with Amelia at the party. She's moved on. She's had a new boyfriend, David. Another great writer moment. So he has this test, and he gets his first breakthrough, right? And he's babbling into his tape recorder about the starting and the beginning of life, and then the apes, and it's all the stuff we saw at the beginning of the movie, right? So we're watching Charlie Kaufman have this idea, and then cut to he's listening to it being played back, and you can just see the disappointment and disgust on his face. Oh, this is a horrible idea. And then Donald gets home from the McKee seminar, and he's on cloud nine. He's having those revelations you have when you've just learned something new. And he's talking about how everyone has to be original, but inside their genre. And he says,
My genre's thriller. What's yours? You and I share the same DNA. Is there anything more lonely than that? What'd you say, bro?
and Charlie, you can tell he's just like, he has no idea what his genre is. He even fails to know what the genre of his script is. I guess I had a couple tests for Susan, and probably some things we ought to drop in here. It's hard for me to say where this lands in the script, because again, so much of this is like background information or the story of the script the story of the book unfolding. And as we know, because it's said many, many times in the film, the book lacks structure. So now I'm trying to analyze the structure of the story in a book that has no structure. But Susan calls John, and you could say this is a test of journalistic integrity. Is this a journalist relationship, or is this a romantic relationship Susan's trying to cultivate with John? This is where he tells her about the car accident that killed his mom and his uncle and put his wife in a coma, and how he lost his teeth. And at the end of this story, John tells Susan, well, my wife woke up and left me. And Susan's reaction is, well, I guess I would leave my husband too if I had the chance. It's like, hold on, Susan. You are so disconnected. This man lost everything, and all you can say is you'd have been like his wife and left you. It's horrible.
Well, I think if I almost died, I would leave my marriage too.
Why?
Because I could. Because it's like a free pass. Nobody can judge you if you almost died.
Well, I judged her. Maybe I was being judged too.
So moving on to Approach to the Inmost Cave, where the hero reaches the edge of a dangerous place, where the object of their quest is hidden. I saw the beginning of the approach for Charlie is his meeting with his agent, played by Ron Livingston, who I love Ron Livingston in everything I've ever seen him in. He's great. I think he needs to be in more. Hollywood, put Ron Livingston in more stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, this is a phone call. This isn't the meeting yet. This is the phone call, a voicemail.
Hey, superstar, it's Marty, super agent. Just want to remind you, it's been 13 weeks, and Valerie's anxious to see a draft. So if you could wrap things up, get it to her by Monday, that'd be great.
And this starts the downward slide. Charlie he panics, he's feverishly writing all this ridiculous stuff, and this is kind of what accelerates his journey toward the ordeal.
Totally agree with you. I totally agree with you.
There's also, you talked about procrastinating, which is a wonderful term. I've not heard that before, but he also has this fantasy about sleeping with Valerie.
Yes. He objectifies every woman he ever meets, except Amelia. But he just, Imagine being, well, we haven't gotten there yet. I'll shut up.
Another moment of Approach to the Inmost Cave, I felt, was Charlie going to a restaurant, and he's picking up a to-go order, and he sees Valerie Thomas.
Oh, God.
And there's this awkward moment where he's like, I'm not done yet. And is she going to yell at me? But she's being very encouraging. And, I'm here with Susan Orlean right now. And why don't you stay? Because she would like to meet you. And he bolts. As much as he wants to meet her, he really doesn't want to meet her. And he makes up this excuse about once you start writing about somebody, you can't really meet them because then that completely screws up the narrative you've got in your head. about
Yes.
it. And I love this moment where Spike Jonze, the director, he has set up this shot of Susan Orlean through a doorway into another room where Susan Orlean is taking a phone call.
Yes.
And all you see is a shadow on the wall, and you know Susan Orlean is like pacing probably inside that room. That scene right there is why I put Susan in the enemies column early in the film, because
she's a shadow.
Because she created the book that Charlie is struggling to adapt. So she's kind of the architect of his misery at the moment.
Yeah, that shot sets her up as the enemy and saved the production like $75,000 because Meryl Streep didn't have to be there.
Yeah. Another moment, Charlie, this is the scene I got confused with earlier. Charlie actually has a face-to-face meeting with his agent, Marty.
Yeah.
And who's not paying attention at all. He's like, "Hey, you see that girl? And he's objectifying all the women in the office. While Charlie is saying, "You've got to get me out of this job. I can't do it."
Yeah.
There's no structure. He quotes a book review from the New York Times that talks about the orchid thief in a very unfavorable way.
Yeah.
And he tries to get out of it, and Marty says, "No, you're staying. Maybe even I can help you."
Right.
And you see Charlie, he's just deflated. Now my agent is going to help me write the screenplay.
Or your brother. Your brother should help you.
Or your brother, because his brother has finished his screenplay.
Yep.
And has given it to Charlie to give it to Marty. Marty has read it and he thinks it's brilliant.
And thinks he can sell it for $1 million.
Can you imagine what that does to you? Well, of course you can. As a writer, when you are struggling so hard, it seems like everybody else is succeeding. Everyone else is writing these brilliant novels and screenplays. Wow, I'm still on page 1.
There is a Morrissey song that captures this perfectly. It's called "We Hate It When Our Friends Become Successful." It's so true for creative people because it's so hard to quantify why the person is successful. So much of it is luck, but as fellow artists, we try to quantify it. What is it that I am not or cannot do that person can? And so it generates this envy. And poor Charlie, he sees his brother as this simple dilettante freeloader, and yet here he is hitting home runs.
All right, final element of the approach to the Inmost Cave, and I will shut up and let you move on to the ordeal.
Okay.
Charlie returns home, and he tells Donald,
"I've written myself into my screenplay." That's kind of weird, huh? It's self-indulgent. It's narcissistic. It's solipsistic. It's pathetic. I'm pathetic. I'm fat and pathetic. I'm sure you had good reasons, Charles. You're an artist. The reason is because I'm too timid to speak to the woman who wrote the book. Because I'm pathetic. Because I have no idea how to write. Because I can't make flowers fascinating. Because I suck. Hey, am I in the script? I'm going to New York. I'll meet her. That's it. That's what I have to do.
And then Donald says,
"Don't get mad at me for saying this, Charles, but Bob's having a seminar in New York this weekend. So if you're stuck..."
yes. And that's the end of the approach to the Inmost Cave.
Yeah, okay, we're on this. I'm so surprised and so grateful that you and I are on the same page here.
We're equally inadequate, Jeff.
Yes. Yes. Okay. There's a couple things that are just funny that I wanted to point out. So at one point, Charlie comes home after one of his dejected moments, and Donald is babbling about how he's created an image system for his screenplay, and I've chosen broken mirrors, right? Like, everything he says out loud is a horrible cliche, and yet good movies have been made between all these horrible cliches, and it's just you never get to see any of what Donald is really good at, right? Like, maybe it's great.
The hero's journey itself has been criticized as being just a formula, a cliche pattern that every story's the same. That's kind of the point of the hero's journey. There is a through line that goes from stories in ancient times before people even had written language. That tribes from 2 different corners of the planet that never even met each other, their origin stories and their religious stories have the same elements.
Yeah.
Because there's something within us, within humans, that respond to a story like this, that respond to the hero's journey. There's a reason for it.
Charlie is reading the book, reading The Orchid Thief out of desperation. And then he has a procrastination fantasy about Susan Orlean. Imagine being the real-life Susan Orlean and reading the screenplay that is supposed to be the adaptation of your book, and you're now reading a scene where the screenwriter is jerking off to the book flap photo of your book. Can you imagine? I wish that had been filmed. She was like, is this a joke? Am I being pranked? Anyway, there's one really nice moment. After that fantasy, Charlie he starts to have an insight into what Susan Orlean's passion, her problem is trying to find that passion, trying to seek that one thing. And he's dictating into his tape recorder, and Donald and Maggie Gyllenhaal, whose character name I can't remember, they have this really nice scene in the kitchen where Charlie is kind and encouraging to Donald. And you can see Donald just like that lifts him up. It's part of a change that's beginning to show in Charlie. Oh, and just one other thing that I got emotional. I'm so stupid. So the scene you mentioned where he says, I have to meet Susan Orlean, he is about to hit rock bottom, and he says, I'm fat and pathetic. And Donald says, I'm sure you had good reasons, Charles. You're an artist. Like, Donald is holding this space for whatever Charlie is or however messed up he is. It just must be part of his brilliant artistic process. And even though he's annoyingly optimistic and maybe a little dim, he's clearly the better of the two brothers. He is. Charlie needs him way more than he needs Charlie. Well, that leads us into Ordeal. Our hero faces the ultimate test, often risking death to overcome his worst fears, sometimes actually appearing to die. So Charlie goes to New York. He goes to the New Yorker building in New York and gets in an elevator. And I don't know if this is a real building, but each of the floors in this elevator is named after a different famous publication. I guess they could all be in the same building, but instead of floor 1, floor 2, floor 3, it's like Cosmopolitan, Elle, New Yorker. I thought that was really funny and idyllic. I don't know if it's real. So he's in the elevator, and Susan Orlean gets into the elevator, the person he has come to speak with. But Charlie is completely petrified, can't speak. He sort of softly moans as he reaches out to talk to her, and then
he's just the sound that he makes, just and she's in front of him, and she kind of freezes and looks out of the corner of her eye, what the hell was that?
Yeah, her whole experience of him is the creeper in the elevator. So that's it. And he goes back to the hotel, not having met her, and he's miserable, and Marty calls. By the way, I love this late 90s, early 2000s men's fashion where the dress shirts were really baggy. We saw it in Seven with the bag. I very recently threw away my last few white shirts that were like that, I'm embarrassed to say. Anyway. I
actually still have a few that I need to get rid of. They're just in the back of the closet, and I'd have to reach and my back.
My back. My back. And some of them were in good shape, which shows you how often I wear a dress shirt. This is when Marty says he loves the three and he's going to sell it.
He says it's the best. It's the best script he's read all year, and he suggests bringing Donald on to help.
Exactly, and that is just the devastating moment that his brother might somehow be a better writer than he is, and he says he's amazing at structure, which of course is what Charlie is so bad at. It's like poking him right in the heart. So this is the ultimate low point. This is the hero facing death. He goes to the McKee seminar. After all of his railing on McKee and his stupid rules and tearing down the 10 Commandments that Donald put up over his workspace, he goes to the McKee seminar and he's moving through the crowd to find a seat. And his voiceover is just telling him what a loser he is and he's failed. And then he raises his hand during questions and answer. And the audience is going, "No, Charlie, don't." And he stands up and he asks this question, and McKee just reams him, absolutely humiliates him in front of the whole class. And that is his ordeal. That is the dark moment.
I love that moment where Charlie is sitting in the auditorium listening to McKee, and he's doing his self-berating and I'm a loser and everything. This is all voiceover narration. And then you hear McKee, God help you if you put voiceover narration in your script, my friends. God help you.
It's flaccid, sloppy writing.
It's lazy, flaccid writing. Anyone can describe a character's thoughts.
Yeah. It's so, again, everything about this script is so brilliant and self-referential, and it's just so great. When I saw this film in the theater, I was absolutely blown away, and I loved being John Malkovich, but when we saw Adaptation, which was the second one I had seen of his, he just became instantly one of my favorite writers.
I saw an ordeal for Susan that I think is the right ordeal, which is she wants to see the ghost orchid. She persuades LaRoche to lead her into the swamp, and they get lost.
Yeah, that's what I saw as
Okay,
her
good.
ordeal as well.
Oh my God, Dan, I'm so relieved right now. I thought this whole episode was just going to be a complete train wreck, but it seems that at some point we are in sync.
Next segment is the ultimate boon. Having faced his worst fear, that's pretty appropriate in this case.
Yeah,
the hero
McKee is his worst fear, right?
The hero seizes the object of his quest. So after the seminar, Charlie runs into McKee. Well, actually, he's waiting for McKee outside, and he begs McKee for help.
Mr. McKee, my even standing here is very scary. I don't meet people well. But what you said this morning shook me to the bone. What you said was bigger than my screenwriting choices. It was about my choices as a human being. Please.
Yeah. Well, you know, I could sure use a drink, my friend.
And while they're at the pub, McKee gives him like the holy grail of, I guess, of screenwriting tips.
Right.
Even though it sounds like the most unhelpful, useless piece of advice.
Tell you a secret. The last act makes the film. One of them in the end. You got a hit.
And Charlie's just like, you promise? And they hug, and it's just like, it's this big moment for them, but it means nothing. It really doesn't.
Yeah, and I would just say, he says, find an ending, but don't cheat, right? The character change has to come from within, and don't bring in a Deus Ex. It's all these tropes, all these trite things that anyone knows, and that never help you write anything.
But what he's saying is exactly what is happening.
Yes.
It's happening as he's narrating. He's basically saying what is going on at that moment.
Yeah, he's the Deus Ex Machina. He's the Deus Ex Machina that he's telling him not to bring in. I would tag one other scene on the end of this. He goes back and he calls Donald after the McKee seminar from his hotel in New York and congratulates him on his script and asks him to come help. And this is a low point, but this is also a moment of honest connection with his brother. We've seen his relationship with his brother, the tension get ratcheted up. And at its tightest point is when Marty says, you should ask your brother for help. And that's what drops him into this abyss of, I'll just go to McKee. And now he's been humbled. His ego has died, essentially. This is the death of the hero's ego. And he calls his brother and asks for help. And his brother comes. That's part of his reward of being humbled in this ordeal. His brother comes and he says, we're going to fix your movie, bro. And he says, you need to go. We really do need to go see. You need to meet her face to face. You need to meet Susan Orlean. And so to me, that's the end of Act 2.
Yeah, agreed.
Let's go take Mr. McKee to the Vogler Lounge and get us a drink.
I don't know. He didn't really seem very helpful.
Maybe he'll change us. I have needed a drink more in no other episode of The Hero's Journey.
I think I drank more doing the analysis of this episode than any other.
That's one thing Charlie doesn't really do is drink. He's like, I got to get home so I can get up early and work. He's pretty responsible and professional in that way.
Yeah, the one drink that he has is at the pub with Robert McKee.
All right, Dan, I went first last time. You got to go first.
We've talked a couple times already about how difficult we found this analysis and how meta that is, because that's what the movie's about. and this is our November episode. One of the events that happens every November is NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month.
Yes.
Many tears are shed, I am sure.
Yes.
And so I think it is very appropriate that my beverage is Writer's Tears Irish Whiskey.
Excellent.
I haven't had a bottle of this in a long time, but I knew immediately that once Adaptation ended up being the selection by the patrons, I immediately knew that this is what I had to select. So this is the second bottle I've ever bought. It is an Irish whiskey. Really subtle aromas. I can't identify it. The flavor is a lot richer than the scent. Usually when I have an Irish whiskey, they're super, super mellow, and this is, but there's more of a, almost like a bourbon-y quality to it. I wonder if this was, distilled to perfection in flame-charred bourbon barrels.
You are a legitimate phenomenon.
I should look that up. Let's see if that's a quality of Irish whiskeys, though. What do you got while I continue to chug this?
So, as I was trying to think about what drink would be appropriate for this episode, I just kept thinking, you always find a better drink than me, and the drinks that I find always feel like they're sort of like third rate, maybe. I mean, you did all the drinks for so long, and then when I started doing the drinks, they were super lame, like, oh, what do I have in my house that I can vaguely relate to the theme? And I realized that I'm not as good at picking drinks as you are, and that's okay. So I got on the internet, I'm trying to find, and I found a beer called Hollywood Way IPA. Now,
I've been
Hollywood is where the screenplay takes place, and it's also where Charlie wrote the screenplay of the screenplay. But instead of that, I found a bottle of Writer's Tears Irish whiskey.
Yes! Yes! Okay, now tell me, was that beer story, did you just make that up?
No, I did find that beer, and I was trying to decide between that and Writer's Tears, and I really wanted to try this, and I figured there was a high percentage chance that this is what you would choose too, and that it was somehow more meta that we both chose the same thing.
Yeah.
So
we are really like two halves of the same mind, like Charlie and Donald are.
I'd rather be the happier version, if that's all right. The happier,
Sure.
richer, more commercially person. I don't want to suffer.
Go for it. Well, you're the one with a successful writing career. Mine is, I'm still struggling with the blank page.
Yeah, but you're an artist. You're an artist. I'm sure you have your reasons. So I dove into the genealogy thing a couple of years ago, and I traced my family back to James Garvin. In the early mid-18th century, brought my family from Cork, Ireland, all the way by way of Pennsylvania to northern Indiana, where the Garvins have stayed until my parents brought us to California. And so I've become more and more interested in Irish lore and culture. So bit by bit, I've been dipping in, and I'm super excited because we have several listeners in Ireland, several of whom I've interacted with on Twitter. So just shout out to to our Irish listeners.
Sláinte.
All right, here we go. That's a good 11 a.m. pour of whiskey. All right. Now my take.
I am so amused that you have the same thing.
Oh man.
You see
man.
It's just richer than your
does.
typical Irish whiskeys.
It's got the smoothness of an Irish whiskey, but you introduced me to Irish whiskey that time we went to Timmy Nolan's.
Timmy Nolan's.
Timmy Nolan's,
which is not there anymore.
Yeah. But we had like 3 or 4 Irish whiskeys that day, and I went home and saved up for a bottle of Kirkland's Costco brand Irish whiskey, and I'm about 3/4 of the way through that. But it has what I love about bourbon, but it's got that smooth sort of caramely vanilla. But I get the diesel thing too. That's right.
Yeah, vanilla. That could be what this is.
This is just delicious.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I'm gonna drink way too much of this today.
Hey, we earned this.
When we are back in physical production again, it would be great for us to do some of these drinking segments like on location at places around Los Angeles. I just think that would be a really cool thing to do.
Absolutely. We could video them too and just pop them on the end of a video segment.
And it would be great to promote local brewers and distilleries. I mean, that would be really fun.
All right, one more sip of this writer's tears, and then we've got to get into Act 3.
Oh, it tastes like suffering. Delicious.
Act 3 begins with the road back. The hero is pursued by vengeful forces they disturbed when they seized the object of their quest. I'll be damned if I could get this road back to conform to vengeful forces. I really tried to come up with a way of spinning it. Donald, posing as Charlie, goes to interview Susan because Charlie can't do it. And he asks whether she was romantically involved with John LaRoche, and Susan denies it, and Donald knows she's lying. He goes back to Charlie's hotel room to tell him the good news, and Charlie is baffled. This is my favorite scene in the movie, Dan. It's Nicolas Cage and Nicolas Cage acting together. It never pulled me out of the movie that it's two Nicolas Cages in the room. I'm totally in the scene.
Yeah.
That is a tribute to Nicolas Cage, to Spike Jonze, to the editors. It never occurred to me to think, wait a minute, I'm out of the story because there's two Nicolas Cages. It's so good.
Never once throughout this entire film did that affect me. I bought it the whole time.
That's such a huge thing.
Everybody, the entire crew of this film that made this imagery completely seamless.
Yeah.
Hats off to all of them.
This scene is so full of non sequiturs and natural dialogue, and Donald's so excited he's got the answers. Get where you got to get binoculars. Why do I need to get you binoculars?
This is the beginning of the heist. It becomes a heist film now.
Exactly right. Here comes the big. He's starting to develop the big wow in the third act. So they spy on Susan Orlean in her office. They look through binoculars. Somehow he can see the screen of her computer from across the building.
Hey, those are good binoculars, and New York skyscrapers are very close together.
That's true. So Donald then checks out LaRoche's website and his porn site that he's developed, which is a whole other B-side thing. And there's a picture of Susan LaRoche topless. So he says, they've got to be involved. We've got to go to Miami.
No, Susan Orlean. I think you said Susan LaRoche.
Susan LaRoche. Well, a little bit.
I don't know.
Susan Orlean,
Oh,
yes. Susan Orlean.
I love this part of the film, by the way, because at this point, you know all of this. Like before, all the scenes with Orlean and LaRoche could conceivably have happened. That they could have been part of Orlean's experience writing the New Yorker article and then the book. But Act 3, from this point on, you know all of this is complete fabrication because it's everything that Charlie said he didn't want this film to be.
Right.
Car chases, sex, guns, drug running, all that stuff. He crams it all into Act 3, and it's just so packed and ridiculous and so much fun.
Yes. Okay, so this was hard for me, the line between road back and resurrection. So I'm just going to keep going, and then when I'm bumping into resurrection, just plant the flag, okay? There's a Susan and LaRoche flashback that's key to this sequence. So they've been in the swamp, they got lost, they find the ghost orchid, but it's a huge disappointment to Susan. It's just a flower. She's not moved by it at all.
Yeah.
So they get in the truck and they're on their way back home from the swamp, and LaRoche can tell that Susan is just unsettled and he's losing her. So he tells her that the orchid can be distilled to make a very powerful drug that makes you fascinated. So now,
yes,
it's not just a heist movie. Now it's a drug movie. So now Susan's in the hotel room and she's snorting just mountains of this green tea ice cream colored powder that was allegedly distilled from an orchid. And she had Meryl Streep. This is the scene I'm convinced
she gets so high
that got her the Oscar, because she is brushing her teeth and she's all of a sudden she's fascinated with the feeling of brushing her teeth. Cut to, She's just with the phone to her ear listening to the dial tone. She's humming, trying to match the dial tone. She calls LaRoche and makes him hum so they can match the dial. It's the best being high scene in a movie I've ever seen. And it's all Meryl Streep.
I'm trying to make a dial tone, and you have to sustain, and then I will join you, and together. See, I can't do it by myself.
Okay, which one do you want me to do?
Yes, yes, yes.
Here we go. We got it.
Resurrection, then, the master of two worlds. The hero faces death one more time in a final battle or showdown. This time, the danger is at the apex. Charlie and Donald discover the drug operation where John actually has dozens of these ghost orchids growing in a greenhouse. Right. Donald offers to sneak up to the property and spy, and Charlie says, no, I should be the one. So this is Charlie taking steps.
Yep.
You know, he's taking some heroic steps.
Characters changing and having
learning
profound
life lessons, everything that he didn't want this movie to be. So he creeps up, he finds the drug operation and the greenhouse, and then he sees Susan and John LaRoche stooping on the couch.
Now it's a sex movie.
And John sees him and chases him out of the house. He's buck naked. They capture Charlie. Susan Orlean recognizes him finally and says, we have to kill him.
Kill the screenwriter.
Charlie Kaufman, he's got to be having a great time now. I get to have Susan Orlean / Meryl Streep suddenly go on a homicidal bent, and
he's seen too much.
So at gunpoint, Orlean forces Charlie into his car. Donald, we don't know, is hidden in the back seat.
Right.
Susan Orlean, again, this is a writer for the New Yorker. And as you said earlier, when Susan Orlean was reading this script and seeing the Charlie Kaufman masturbating to the photo of Susan Orlean, now suddenly she's an adulterer, she's a drug user, she's about to become a murderer. What must she have been thinking? What is happening to this book? I wrote this nice book about orchids. What is going on? So they drive to the swamp. And this is where she's going to eliminate her problem. Yes. And but before that can happen, Donald interrupts the murder, and the two twins escape into the swamp.
Yes.
There's this really nice moment, though, as Susan and John are creeping through the swamp in the middle of the night looking for the brothers. The two brothers have this connection. There's this moment. You know, Donald has kind of rescued Charlie physically and creatively. The boys have apparently slept through the night. They wake up in the morning. It's quiet. They start to try to sneak out of the swamp, but they find John with his rifle across his lap. And as they think they've made it, Susan sees them, and she shouts for John. He wakes up, almost reflexively fires his rifle and hits Donald in the arm.
Yeah, I don't think he meant to shoot him. It's just he's trying to get up and he pulls the trigger. Yeah. I rewatched that moment a bunch of times to try and discern if that was an intentional shot or not. I don't think it was.
So now we've got this foot chase, which is what Charlie didn't want in his movie. And
more chase.
And John gets attacked by an alligator, and there's this big dramatic death moment. Orlean is cradling John as he dies, and then Donald and Charlie get into a car. They escape. Car crash. Donald is pitched through the windshield and is, I would say, mortally wounded.
Yeah.
I worked with a guy when this movie came out who never wore his seatbelt. And this guy that I used to work with said he started wearing his seatbelt because of this movie.
Wow. Spike Jonze, saving life. Charlie Kaufman, saved life.
First of all, it's a shocking moment. Just like the car crash that LaRoche suffered that killed his mother and his uncle, put his wife in a coma. It's the same moment. But it is the moment that Charlie, He talks about, I don't want characters to learn big life lessons, and characters grow to like each other, which is what Charlie, he grows to like Donald. He's annoyed with Donald the entire film until the end. And Charlie gets down with Donald, and Donald's lying in the dirt and he's dying, and he starts singing Happy Together to him, which previously in the film, Donald has tried that on Charlie, right? Because he puts that song in his script.
Yeah.
And even though he knows it kind of goes against convention.
Right.
This is his moment where he really connects with Donald, but it's the farewell. It's Donald was was the other half of Charlie, not just in the fact that they were twins.
Mm-hmm.
That's in the film. But in real life, there is no Donald Kaufman.
Right.
So by creating the character of Donald Kaufman and giving him all the qualities that are the almost antithesis of what Charlie is, and then killing him off, one would think that the death of Donald would be the death of all the joy in Charlie's life. But what actually happens is it melds the two.
Yeah, he absorbs Donald's energy somehow.
Right, and that is represented by Charlie kneeling in the dirt, trying to comfort his dying brother, singing Happy Together to him.
It really is a heartbreaking death scene. All of a sudden, in this goofy, crazy movie, you watch this innocent, beloved supporting character just die horribly.
Yeah.
Senselessly, really.
That's the end of that's the end of Resurrection for me, which is kind of a weird way to name this segment, considering that Donald actually dies, but the effect is on Charlie.
Which brings us to Return with the Elixir. The hero, having won some precious treasure or reward, now returns to the ordinary world to share the spoils of battle. The crisis is over. Charlie's back in his Los Angeles. He's no longer in the swamps of Florida. And he goes out on another outing with Amelia. It's not quite a date. And as they're saying goodbye, he finally has the stones to kiss her and tell her that he loves her. And she's with somebody else now, but she says she loves him too. And so we get that romantic satisfaction of the I love you too. It's not a perfect Hollywood ending, though, like Charlie would hate it if it was, because she doesn't say, oh, I'm leaving him for you. She, turns and walks away, but we at least understand that the feeling is mutual. And then finally, as Charlie is driving out of the parking garage, he realizes he has the ending of his screenplay. And in the ultimate meta moment, he narrates himself narrating the end of the movie.
I have to go right home. I know how to finish the script now. It ends with Kaufman driving home after his lunch with Amelia, thinking he knows how to finish the script. That's voiceover. McKee would not approve. How else can I show his thoughts? I don't know. Oh, who cares what McKee says? It feels right. Conclusive.
And the last shot is a time-lapse shot of flowers growing in the foreground and LA traffic zipping by in the background, and we hear the Turtles happy together. Fade to credits.
It's such a satisfying screenplay.
Ugh, it's so tight. I have to go right home now. I know how to finish my analysis.
Jeff, we have to.
It ends with Jeff recording the outro, thinking he knows how to finish his analysis.
We just recorded the episode. It's too late to go back. We can't.
My ordeal was the analysis itself, and this is my reward. Oh, that's supposed to come in Act 2. Campbell would not approve.
Jeff.
Well, who cares what Campbell says? It feels right.
Okay, I can get into this. Okay, so Dan and Jeff finish recording their outro, and then they get to the stuff at the end about
the patrons. Yeah. Thanking the demigod patrons.
Both boys react. Erica Garvin, Jeffrey Scott, John Peterson Jr.,
Joseph Wilbur, Michelle Calderon, Scott Sanford, and Chris Bodeker. And then we'll say the thing about if you like what you're hearing and you want to support a couple of writers doing their thing, go to patreon.com/heroesjourney and become a patron.
Right. And then I'll say, please go to your podcast app and give The Hero's Journey a 5-star rating, because that makes a big difference. It really does. Also, you can listen to The Hero's Journey on YouTube, on Spotify, and on our website at heroesjourneypodcast.com.
God, this is it's all coming together. And I'll pimp our social media. Heroes Journey Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, at Heroes Podcast on Twitter, and then you'll do the
copyright stuff.
Yes, yeah.
Adaptation, copyright, 2002 Columbia Pictures Industries, Inc., yada yada.
And then after that, we'll close with until next time.
Journey on.
Yeah, I like this. This is good.
Imagine me and you, I do. Come on, I think about you day and night. It's only right. Come on, sing with me. To think about the one you love and hold her tight. So happy together.
What the hell do you need binoculars for?